Hello everybody, this is Fun Police, and this is going to be a very quick video, but I wanted to get this out because just today, with the last update to cards, seemingly a couple unreleased cards were accidentally put in the draft pool and people very quickly found them. And although we don't have an official word about them, they are definitely official because people were playing with them in game. And the biggest thing is that the devs have just announced a new mode where every weekend you're going to be able to play and access a unique promo unit and get access to these cards through just winning a battle in these events. So I would say that these are likely what we're going to see in such an event because it kind of makes sense that they would put in a handful of these cards and then you can play for them every weekend. But let's essentially just talk about these three cards. So the first one is a Soviet card. It's hard to see, and the people that mostly found this were on the Chinese side of the community because the update came out around when they were playing. So a lot of these images are mostly translated, but this is Rapid Reinforcements, a Soviet 1 credit card that is limited, and it says and this translation is a bit rough, but we had some better ones that were I couldn't find access to. But essentially, it says for this turn, units you deploy or add randomly get either Blitz, +1/+1, or Ambush. So that is a very interesting effect. Being able to play, I think the first thought is everybody thinks is tokens. And tokens honestly doesn't mind this effect. Being able to give your tokens either Blitz or +1/+1 is not a bad effect for 1 credit. But the biggest thing is that they don't really like Ambush because you would rather have them more stats or immediately get them into the front line and buff them there. Ambush is usually not something that is very useful to tokens. So that's a bit of a downside for them. But because it works with both deploying and adding units, it does work with pretty much everything within tokens, which is quite nice. However, there's also maybe another aspect where you have some larger units that actually get the benefit from this. I can think of a fair amount of units, such as something like a big guard or some medium-sized guards that would overall benefit from either like +1/+1, getting ambush, or even blitz in some occasions. It's a hard card to say where it'll end up, and because it definitely has kind of a lower impact and it's a bit random, you definitely want it in a deck that is putting out a lot of units on a turn. Maybe aggro could use it. Like, I could almost see Japan aggro using something like this. The biggest question that hasn't been answered yet, officially at least, is whether or not these effects can stack. So can like a blitz unit get blitz a second time and essentially get a dud? If it doesn't, I think this is a lot more interesting because you could, for example, play a Japanese aggro unit with blitz and then it either gets +1/+1 or ambush. And that honestly doesn't seem too bad. Being able to give your 15th Cavalry and make them 3/2s for 1 credit, not a bad deal. Or even if it has ambush, that can be a strong way to fight for the front line and make it hard for the enemy to trade into it. It's an interesting card, and I don't know exactly where it's going to fit. I don't have the highest hopes of it like radically shifting the meta, but it would potentially offer some interesting effects. Then we have the British card, a British order. It is a standard 2 credit order, and it says enemy units get takes 1 damage at the beginning of its owner's turn. So this is a 2 credit, 1 damage board clear, but it repeats every turn until that unit dies. That is potentially very powerful. Being able to repeatedly ping down an enemy board and eventually kill units is quite powerful. And obviously, I think the biggest interaction is with pins. Most notably, a long forgotten card called Critical Damage says whenever this unit, you give the enemy units an effect where whenever they take damage, they get pinned. So supply shortage essentially, if combined with the critical damage, could infinitely pin a unit until it dies, essentially instantly killing it, with the upside of it taking up enemy board space. That is potentially very, very powerful, and definitely seems like probably the biggest interaction between the two. However, if that version does not work out, or if that combo isn't found to be powerful enough, although that does seem the most powerful interaction, ignoring that, I should say, supply shortage seems pretty okay. It's very similar to other cheap 2 credit board clears. This one is a bit weird because you kind of have to play it early on, which means that you're not hitting as many units, but you need it to happen on like turn 2 or turn 3 in order to reliably kill the enemy units before they kill you. So unlike a lot of board clears, it's a bit of an interesting conundrum where you want to play it early to maximize the damage and kill the enemy units as fast as possible, but if you play it quick enough, it's not hitting enough units to maybe be worth it. You know, if you play this and kill off, say, 2 1 health enemy units, okay, that's nice, but it's not any different than most of the other 1 damage board clears. So it could potentially be much stronger, but I think we'll have to see in testing how effective it is. Is it strong enough to inspire a deck to go very heavy on pins? Maybe. Is it enough to like radically shift how Britain performs against aggro? I have a little more doubts in that. The biggest thing I think is that you might be able to run different allies than you do now. Most notably, you don't have to run like Britain, Japan in order to have access to Tora alongside something like Monsoon Rot, because now you can just use this. But there's all a bunch of things. I don't think it's outside of the potential interaction with critical damage. I don't think this is like particularly out of line power wise. It's just simply put, maybe a bit more. It's just a little board clear that can scale up if you give it time. But that slowness, I do think, is a legitimate downside. And this also is particularly pretty much useless late game. Against medium-sized units, you can't scale this damage in any way, so it's going to be really low impact after those early turns. And then the final card was the FI 156 plane. It's a 3 credit, 1 operation cost German fighter. It's a special. It has 1 attack and 3 health. And then it says, at the end of your turn, randomly activate a countermeasure in your hand. Again, sorry for these rough translations, but these were just the first one. This was the quickest collection I found that isn't scattered, and I can show off all the cards at once. But the FI 156 is potentially quite interesting. Being able to activate a countermeasure for free in hand every turn potentially is a big boost to countermeasure decks. The biggest option is obviously Entrapment, because you activate a 5 credit card for free, essentially, which is very, very powerful. But I think, honestly, this works on almost any countermeasure. Whether that is something such as From the Deep, up to, again, Entrapment, or anything in between. And the reason for that is that the FI 156 essentially will pay for itself when it activates a countermeasure, and it naturally is able to set up defenses to protect it. So it's a pretty self-sufficient card if you have a good set of countermeasures to protect it. Being able to put out if you play this on turn 3, it activates From the Deep. You've essentially only spent 1 credit for this, because you get a free, quote-unquote, 2 credits for activating From the Deep. So that's a very interesting effect, and I think it creates an interesting thing of how do you want to build your countermeasure deck. I think it's honestly a really cool card, and personally, it's my favorite one out of these 3. But that's all I have in terms of cards, because we've only seen these 3. Maybe there's more in draft, but nobody's found them yet. But let me know down in the comments which of these 3 cards is the most interesting to you. Do you think any of them look particularly broken, or just your general thoughts on the cards? I'm always interested to hear what you guys say. But otherwise, that is all I have for today. Just a quick little video covering this accidental leak. But I want to thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe to not miss out on content, because I'll definitely be doing more cards content with if these new cards start coming out or if we see more reveals. There's potentially a lot of stuff going on in cards, so expect more content. Thank you all so much for watching, though, and have a good day.